Everybody, thanks for coming for week 3 here for Buddhism 101. Thank you everyone online for coming and viewing today. So hope everything's coming through loud and clear. So let's see, why don't we get started here as usual with, maybe just generate a little bit of motivation here, good positive motivation for joining together here, learning a little bit about the Dharma together, trying to increase our understanding of what Buddhism is all about, and to cultivate our curiosity and our, like I say, our understanding. So generate a good motivation to do that. May we benefit all beings by understanding the Dharma just a little bit more clearly. So just generate that motivation. Now too, let's just do a short meditation, just a minute or two, not spending a lot of time on it because we want to get into our class material here today, but just take a moment to just let the mind settle down a little bit. Come into the present moment. Come into your body. Come into the room you're at. Just let things go. Let go of your concerns and worries that may have been building up throughout the day. Bring your awareness to right now. And bring your awareness to the breath. Just notice the sensation as it comes in through your nostrils, filling your lungs, filling your abdomen. Just notice as it leaves your body. Let's just do this for 3 nice, relaxed breaths. Let's just finish on our last exhale with a nice ah sound. Ah. All right, so let's see here. So I thought maybe we'd just do like a quick little review of last week. Just kind of see where we're at here. I'm not sure if from week 1 to week 2 to week 3 to week 4 I had any sort of a plan of continuity or not, but let's see, maybe. Maybe there is something, I don't know. But so last week we looked at, first of all, the first week we talked about the Buddha's life. We talked about basically his first teachings and some of the things that he taught throughout his lifetime after that. And then last week we kind of delved into a little bit deeper, what he taught in terms of, what do sort of Buddhists, quote unquote, believe, people who follow the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha in all of its various traditions. So we talked about a few things. We talked about the 4 seals, which are, does anybody remember, basically what those are? Yeah.
All composite phenomena are impermanent.
Uh-huh.
All contaminated phenomena are of the nature of being unsatisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
All phenomena are empty of self,
Mm-hmm.
and nirvana is peace.
Right. Right. So we talked about those things a little bit, and because these are basically the hallmarks of uh, what we would then call a Buddhist teaching or a Buddhist belief system or a Buddhist tenet system. So if you're looking at something and it's claiming to be Buddhist, for example, and it denies the fact that all phenomena are of the nature of impermanence, or all compounded phenomena, things with parts, are of the nature of impermanence. If it says no, actually things are permanent, you're like, actually, then that's not Buddhist. So, and then the same goes for the other of the four seals as well. So, if there's a claim that there's some sort of satisfaction to be gained out of ordinary phenomena, then that's probably not very Buddhist either. And then the same goes for if there's a denial of interdependence or what's called emptiness, where it's the view or the observation that nothing actually exists in and of itself. It actually is a composite of parts and causes and conditions that all come together momentarily to manifest for it, just not even a blink of an eye, as an object. So like a chair is just, it's a collection of all of these parts, and we look at it and we label it chair. But when we look deeply into it, we're like, well, we can't really find that, inherent chairness to it. So we can do that exercise with all phenomena. So anyway, so if that isn't there in a doctrine or in somebody's teachings, or if somebody's getting up and saying like, no, actually, there is no interdependence, but they're claiming to be Buddhist, you can be like, well, actually, this is one of the four seals, which is one of the hallmarks of whether something is a Buddhist teaching or not, is that things are actually interdependent. So it's not really like, what do I want to say? It's not like dogmatic stuff. It's just, we're just simply trying to like say like, okay, so we're trying to define our terms here. So when we say we're Buddhists, what do we mean by that? If we follow the Buddhist teachings, what did the Buddha basically teach? And he taught, these four things. So, and then the fourth one is that nirvana is ultimate liberation from the round of cyclic existence and rebirth and all these sorts of things. So it's the dispelling of all ignorance of, actually it's what it is the dispelling of ignorance that things are permanent, things are satisfactory, and things are not interdependent. So once you've completely eradicated that, all those misconceptions, then you have attained what's called nirvana. And then it doesn't mean that you just like kick back with a Mai Tai, virgin Mai Tai on the beach somewhere for the rest of existence. But you can, but you'll get bored, so you have to come teach all the sentient beings who are still thinking that Mai Tais are the way to go, so but yeah, so it's a realization. It's an ultimate, final realization of all these things without any doubt whatsoever, without any residual questioning about that. And so that is what's called liberation or peace, or or just finally being free from the cycles of existence. So we talked about that a little bit. We talked about the three types of suffering. Anybody remember what those are, kind of, a little bit?
The suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. Right.
So we just talked a little bit about that, and what that term suffering maybe is not the best translation of the word. The Sanskrit word is dukkha, or in Tibetan it's dukngel, and it. Yes, there's suffering is part of the equation there, but really what it is more unsatisfactoriness, because obviously we're not always continuously suffering. We're probably actually feeling pretty good right now, we're free, we're pretty happy, we've got full stomach maybe, or if we're a little bit hungry, it's not that miserable, relatively healthy, all these sorts of things. So we're not like objectively suffering in this moment, but there are different levels of this suffering or unsatisfactoriness of our existence that go to subtler and subtler levels. So you've got, yes, gross suffering, but you've also got just the continuous suffering of change, that no matter how happy you are in any one moment, for example, it's not going to last, and it's going to end. And once you like kind of accumulate all of your stuff that you've been working towards, or you've achieved a goal, or you've got your great house that you wanted, or your job or relationship or whatever, all of these things are ultimately going to come to an end, or you're just going to simply get bored with them after a while anyway. So so that's the suffering of change, and then all pervasive suffering is just the fact that we're just stuck in this sort of round of cyclical existence. We're just constantly stuck in this trap of misgauging everything, and trying to get happy, trying to get that lasting happiness, but going about it in a completely, wrong way. not because it's not, it's not to like really belittle ourselves too much. I mean, it does. It makes sense, like, yeah, I mean, I like that thing, so I want it, so I get it, and that's how I'm going to be happy, right? So that's sort of intuitive, but actually that's not how we get happiness. And so anyway, so the all-pervasive suffering is just us being stuck in this continuous wheel, this kind of hamster wheel of we're going after happiness in the wrong way, and we're just not getting it. So that's really, but we think that it's normal, so we're just going and going and going. We're like, this is the way to do it, and so we're not even aware that actually that it's causing us so much suffering. So anyway, so that's a little bit of that. We talked a little bit about refuge as well, basically what that means. It means doing a little bit of contemplation on all these things, and doing a little bit of study about what the Buddhism is all about, and then making the decision in our own lives, in our own hearts, that I'm going to try a different way, rather than go after external things as the source, the means to my ultimate happiness. I'm going to try to actually transform my mind instead, and transform, how I think about things, and how I view things, and how I understand things, and how I relate to things. And in order to do that, though, it takes a little bit of help, and it takes a little bit of support and guidance. And so we try to look to the things that can give us that ultimate guidance, and things that we can rely upon, things that we can take refuge in from this wheel of endless cyclical existence, endless incarnations, that we've been endlessly disappointed, endlessly dissatisfied in our efforts to be happy. And we say instead, like, no, I'm not going to take refuge then in Ben and Jerry's ice cream and Pete's coffee, and I'm trying, I really am, trying not to, but instead I'm going to then take refuge in other things. So what are those things? Then they're the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, is what we eventually, after some study and examination, come to our own conclusion that these things are reliable refuges, because these things represent ultimate truth, the ultimate path to actually getting out of this endless wheel of cyclical existence. Okay, so that was last week in a nutshell there. So this week, this is week 3 here. I thought, how many people are familiar enough with Buddhism to know that there's like a lot of lists in Buddhism? Have you like been exposed to this thing of like the 3 thises and the 6 that's and the 10 whatevers and all this kind of stuff? You've kind of seen that kind of stuff a little bit, or we got the 3 jewels, for example.
Okay, talked about it when I asked her a question about. I asked about the yamas and niyamas of yoga and the ethics, and she said, "Oh, Buddhism has a lot of
yes, we do.
Et cetera, et cetera.
We do. Yeah, so there's tons and tons of lists out there, and so that can be, especially to a newcomer, it can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. It's like, oh my gosh, another list of things I have to memorize or know or whatever. And there's a reason for that, though. There's a reason that there's so many lists of things grouped in certain categories and so on and so forth. And it's because back when Buddhism was being founded and developed and all that sort of stuff, it was very much an oral culture, an oral tradition. So things were communicated and knowledge was stored by memory and memory alone. Like, for example, the Buddha's discourses, which was about 40 years of teaching, everything that he said was memorized. Okay, granted, yes, I'm sure there's like tons of, things that are like incorrect or haven't been translated properly or been lost over the years or whatever, but to a large degree, a lot of what the Buddha taught was memorized by a few key people, and that was then handed down in an oral tradition for a couple of hundred years before it was ever written down, actually physically written down using written language. So when you go back and you read these original sutras and stuff like that, there's tons of lists in them, and there's tons of like repetition as well. So they're kind of were memorized in this sort of poetic verse, So you've got these different, meters and rhythms and stuff that were easy for people to memorize. So I don't know, the Buddha would say something like, what are the qualities of a bodhisattva? Well, these are the qualities of a bodhisattva. Here's one of the qualities of a bodhisattva. Okay, and then it talks about that. And then it's like, okay. And then the Buddha said again, and what is the second quality of a bodhisattva? Here is the second quality of a bodhisattva. The second quality of a bodhisattva is this, da-da-da-da-da. And so you've got like this very nice way of, giving people a lot of like little memory hooks and things like that they can memorize stuff very easily. So all this. There was actually even a monk, a Theravadan monk in Sri Lanka, I believe, who's alive today, who was, until recently, was able to, from memory, give the entire discourse of the Buddha's teachings, like all of the sutras, just from memory, recite them. And it took him 7 days to do it, and he collapsed at the end of it. And apparently the story goes is that he's not able to do that anymore. He still has memorized most of it, but he still has it all there. But he says he's never be able to do that again. But pretty much he can call back from memory like just about everything that was ever said by the Buddha. So pretty amazing. So anyway, so the reason we have all these lists is because of that, because it was then easy for people then to just very quickly recall things. Okay, so what are the 4 seals? And then you have these memory cues. Like, okay, so the 4 seals is the title. 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. And then you can then, call these to mind whenever you kind of need to. So, then you've got the 3 jewels. You've got the 6 perfections. You've got the 10 non-virtues. You've got, all these things that you can memorize. Not just for memorizing, though, not just to show off, not just to get in front of people and say like, hey, I know the entirety of the Buddha's teachings by heart, but so that there's also a very practical reason for this too. So that while you're doing meditation, because there are a couple different types of many different types of meditation, but one of them is analytical meditation, and once you've calmed the mind down enough so that you can focus your mind on an object, first we kind of work with the breath and things like that to calm our minds down. But once we can kind of get ourselves to a nice, even, level state where our minds are very focused and sharp and clear, we can then bring our minds to things like the 6 perfections, for example. And we can then go through and we can say, okay, so I'm just going to contemplate here all the things that I know about the 6 perfections. So you go through the list. Generosity. What is generosity? What does that actually mean? What does it mean to be generous? What are all the ways that one can be generous? And then you can break it down into all these component parts. And this is not a traditional way of doing things from what I understand, but then, we can also then look into our own lives and say like, how am I generous? How am I not generous? How can I improve my generosity and things like that? How does generosity benefit me? How do I feel when I'm generous as opposed to when I'm miserly? So we can use that sort of, one-pointedness to be able to go into great detail into these things. So that's another useful reason for having lists of things, so that we can easily recall in this meditative state without having notes in front of us, without having to look in books and look things up. We can just say, okay, so I'm going to go through now and meditate on these things and analyze them and break them down and really make them a part of who I am. So and try to transform my mind, basically. So these lists are very, very useful. So I'm not going to go through all of them tonight because we just wouldn't have time to, and also I don't know probably that much about all of them anyway. But I thought I don't have these in any real particular order either in here as well. I didn't really think about like, okay, so one is more important than the other, or this is the first list you need to memorize, and then the second one, and then the third one, and things like that. I didn't really think about it that way. It's more like, okay, lists. What are the lists that I kind of have heard about, and kind of put them down that way. So, but they're all quite useful, and they're all things that if you're going to, look into Buddhism a little bit further, these are things that you're going to come across more and more and more, again and again and again as you get deeper into the Buddhist teachings. So So I thought just real quickly we'll just look at the 3 higher trainings: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And John Bruna talks about these a lot. These are kind of the foundation of his teaching curriculum here at Way of Compassion Dharma Center. So these are the things that he stresses a great deal of, and they're really the essence of kind of the Buddhist path. So we're training our minds, and how are we training our minds? We're training in our ethics, our behavior, our conduct. We're training our minds with meditation. And why are we training our minds with meditation? So that we can gain real wisdom and understanding of how things actually exist, how we actually exist, what is the true nature of our mind and awareness. So this is there's a reason actually why these are listed in the order they are. So you begin with ethics. If you don't have ethics, if you don't have this sense of like doing what is ethics in a Buddhist context, it is doing things in accordance with the idea of not harming oneself or others. That's really, from the point of view of love and compassion, So basically, we can look at all kinds of different, you should do this, you shouldn't do that kind of discussion, or we can just say, you know what, if it's harmful to myself or others, then that's the guideline. That's the one and only thing I need to worry about. And so you just need to stop for a minute and think. And sometimes it's not so obvious. Sometimes it's not, sometimes we think that maybe we're doing the right thing out of love and compassion, or out of not wanting to harm ourselves or others, and we wind up harming others anyway, or ourselves anyway. So it's not perfect, but it's a good starting base guideline that we can use when we're determining what we're going to do, when there's time to decide. But basically, once we kind of have embraced this idea that, okay, I'm going to base my conduct basically on this idea of being kind to others, being loving, being compassionate to others, not harming others, not harming myself, then it's much easier actually then to go and start doing some meditation. If you are, imagine that you're, okay, I'm going to use my own life as an example. When I was a drug addict and alcoholic, and I was just like completely out of control, and I did whatever came to mind, and stealing and lying and cheating and whatever. There's no way I was going to be able to meditate. There was no way. Everything that I did was out of line with this ethical idea of being kind to myself, being thoughtful about others, being loving, being compassionate. So there was it would be impossible. It was impossible for me at that time to even consider sitting down and doing any kind of meditation, because your mind is just too out of control. You're just dealing with so much confusion and so much guilt and so much, worry about like, oh, I'm going to get caught in this lie, or I'm going to get caught for this thing that I did, or guilt and shame and fear and all these sorts of things. So meditation is really an impossibility. So that's why we start with ethics first, and we start working on that in a way that is, gradual, and it's a training that we bring into our lives gradually, and hopefully more and more skillfully as time goes on. But once we've kind of stabilized a little bit, have a little bit of a grasp on ethics, then we can sit down and we can do some meditation, because we're not going to be sitting there just going like, oh man, what did I say last night? I don't even remember, because that's all we're going to be able to think about. But once we can kind of calm down a little bit, then we can start working with our minds. Our minds are crazy enough anyway. We don't need the added burden of unethical guilt and unethical, the turmoil that lack of ethics brings to our life. So we sit down, then we can do some meditation, some concentration. And then we're working then with calming our minds down, with focusing our minds a little bit. Because right away, anyone who's done any bit of meditation at all knows that, maybe the first meditation session is like, hey, that was great, that was awesome, But certainly the second one is a nightmare. It's just a complete, like you're just sitting there going like, oh my God, it's been like 4 hours. When is he going to ring that bell? And then you look down and you're like, it's been 3 minutes. Oh my God, I can't. And because your mind, you're bored, your mind is out of control, you're just going from here to there to everywhere else, your leg hurts, so you got to move, and all this stuff goes on, and it's really difficult actually. So the first thing we're working with here in this training of concentration and meditation is getting the mind to settle down a little bit. And the mind can settle down with some practice and some training. It will gradually, chill out a little bit. And it takes some time. It takes some effort. It's not an easy thing. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that you can, it's funny. I've seen advertisements in magazines and stuff, and for CDs that say like meditate like a monk in 10 minutes. Or listen to this sound or this this chant or whatever, and you'll just instantly be meditating. I don't know. I've never tried those, so I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure they don't work. So, so beware. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right? So, but slowly, gradually, over time, you actually can get your mind to start to calm down a little bit. But it does take effort, and it takes commitment, and it takes daily practice, and all these sorts of things. So, but it is possible. So then, once the mind is settled down a little bit, then we move into the next training, which is called wisdom. Which is really it's I don't want to say it's the point of meditation, but it's certainly like the natural sort of outcome of meditation in Buddhist practice anyway. And wisdom meaning what? I mean, does that mean knowing how to do stuff? Like the wisdom of an ordinary life, of like how to I don't know, how to get through marriage or something like that, or how to get a good job, these sorts of things. It's not it's not really about that kind of wisdom. It's about the wisdom realizing what we talked about last week in the Four Seals, the wisdom realizing emptiness, the wisdom realizing how things exist in interdependence. So, and the only way to understand that deeply and to realize that deeply is if your mind is settled, if you've develop some concentration and can really use your awareness and your focus to really deeply penetrate that reality and really examine it and really have a visceral, personal experience of it. And then that's what's called, wisdom of the realization of emptiness. So, and this is that's a super, super high level thing. That's not something that, us as ordinary Buddhists, I mean, we aspire to it, and we shoot for it, and we aim for it, and we can have definitely make some progress toward it in this lifetime. But when we're talking about like like a bodhisattva, it's called or an arhat, a being who has actually realized the same thing that the Buddha has. I mean, that is going to take some time, and if we think that we've realized that, I'm not saying that we all can't, because we can. The Buddha said we can realize that. But if we think we've realized that, we should probably check ourselves and make sure. Absolutely sure that that's what we have realized. Because if we think the way we have, and we start telling people I've realized emptiness, most likely you probably haven't. So that's a pretty dead giveaway. So because the mind's pretty tricky. But anyway, so that's kind of how it goes. So we go ethics, we do some meditation, and then hopefully we cultivate wisdom and understanding. Okay. So the Six Perfections, I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I love the Six Perfections. This is like, to me, also is another very skillful way of, with these short headings, a way of easily communicating the whole point of the Buddhist path and the how-to of the Buddhist path. And if you memorize these things and then do some contemplation on them and then try to integrate them into your daily life, first into your meditation, but then into your daily life, and if you try to bring this stuff into your life, it can be so transformative, and it can really change how you interact with others. It can change how you your state of happiness. It can change your whole view on things, and again, this is something that is not going to happen overnight. It's not something that is just, just because there's only 6 things doesn't mean that it's not simple or it's easy. But it does put things in this light of like, okay, we can do this. We can do this on a daily basis. So we can go through, meditate on the 6 perfections, listen to teachings on the 6 perfections, contemplate the 6 perfections, integrate the 6 perfections into our life, and we're going to see results. It's going to take some time, maybe some years, but we will see a change. So and we'll understand experientially then what the Buddha was talking about, which I'm going to say again and again and again was his entire point. His entire point was like, you need to experience this for yourself. You don't need to, you're not memorizing this stuff again to just simply memorize it. That's not the exercise. The memorization or the deep contemplation, all this stuff is so that you can experience things for yourself, the way that I've experienced them. So yeah, the six perfections are beautiful. And I just listened to a wonderful teaching last night by, his name is the Gyalwang Drukpa Rinpoche. And maybe we'll have a whole course on Tibetan Rinpoche names that are so that are so
That'd be a long course.
that would be yeah for sure. So I'm really like one of the worst at people are always like, hey, this Rinpoche is coming. I'm like, I don't know what that is, because there's just so many of them, which is wonderful, which is good. But anyway, so he's a very high lama in Tibetan Buddhism. So I listened to this wonderful teaching on the six perfections, and he really just got into the first two in this talk that I listened to. But it was so wonderful. It was just so great, how practical he was, and how he was. At one point he said, it's like, look, it's not real, if you believe in reincarnation or not, whatever, that's your business, but these things will help you. They will they will make you happier if you do these things, if you practice them, if you bring them into your life. So he was just very down to earth, but also at the same time very profound. So anyway, the six perfections, these are basically the practices that we try our best to do on this spiritual path of Buddhism. They are all geared towards one thing. They're all geared towards wisdom. At the end here, they're heading all in that direction. All of them are ways to train ourselves and our conduct and our minds and our ways of thinking, to challenge our ways of thinking, to challenge our ways of doing things that have in the past again brought us nothing but dissatisfaction and possibly misery. And these are all ways that are saying like, okay, you've been going in this direction for this long and it got you nowhere, so let's try this way, And so, for example, we start out with generosity. And again, there's a reason you start out with generosity, because normally what's a big thing that's gotten in the way of our happiness is our self-centeredness, our self-cherishing, our putting ourselves at the center of the entire universe. From the moment we wake up in the morning, we're not thinking about anybody but ourselves normally. I mean, maybe if you have kids or something like that, or there's definitely exceptions, but generally speaking, we or pets or dogs or cats or something like that, a cat crawling on your face, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not thinking about myself, but you are thinking about yourself. You're like, oh, now I have to get up and feed the cat or feed the dog or whatever. So okay, maybe, who knows? I guess you have to examine yourself. But anyway, so generally speaking, though, from the moment we wake up, we're thinking about me. Like, what do I need now? We just open our eyes and we're like, I'm tired. Still, I wish I could sleep some more. Oh man, I have to go to work. So it's like it's me. It's just at the center of this narrative that we begin immediately. It's been going on in our sleep too, but from the moment we wake up in the morning, where we start telling this story again, all about with us as the main character. And everybody else is outside of us, and everybody else is just playing a role in our little movie that's just that we're starring in, and that's how we go about our day. And so one of the main teachings of Buddhism is that this is really the core of our problem. This is really for time immemorial has been the story we've been telling ourselves, that I'm real, I exist, I'm the most important. My needs are more important than anybody else's. What I want is more important than what everybody else wants, with few exceptions. And as a result of that, we're stuck. We're stuck in that. That's actually the cause of our suffering, not counterintuitively, it's not what brings us happiness by telling that narrative to ourselves. So what we do when we start practicing generosity or the aim of practicing generosity is to begin to let that go a little bit. We don't do it completely right away, all at once, but we do it gradually, as much as we can, as much as we have a capacity for. And this was something that the Gyalwang Drukpa Rinpoche was talking about in that teaching I was talking about yesterday. He was like, generosity doesn't just mean you give a bunch of stuff away and as much as you can, and actually you just give everything away and then you're done. and then you've mastered generosity, you've perfected generosity. It's not really what it's all about. I mean, he says, like, yes, that giving is good, that it is a good thing, but really what it is about is it's about shifting the focus outward, shifting the focus from me being most important to first to just going outside yourself and saying, like, you know what, everybody else thinks the same thing. And everybody else wants the same thing I want, and that is happiness and enjoyment and freedom from suffering and to not be in pain and all these things. And so when we begin to cultivate generosity, we try to cultivate that mind as well. So we try to look at other people and say, like, you know what, wow, we just try to tune in to what other people need, is essentially what we're trying to do here. And we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't belittle our own needs, because we still have to take care of our bodies, and we still have to take care of ourselves and things like that. But it's taking into account others as well. So we just train in that gradually, slowly, And so some of it is giving material things. Some of it is giving money. Some of it is giving material aid to people, food, clothing, housing. Some of it's giving time, Some of it's just, when somebody comes up and says, hey, or you notice that somebody's having a bad day, instead of just like ignoring that and just going, please don't tell me about your bad day, because I have enough to deal with, Instead of that, you go like, hey, what's going on, man? Are you okay? How you doing today? You don't look so good, or maybe not that direct, but yeah, you look pasty. No, is everything good? You doing all right? And then if they to choose that they want to, to talk to you about it, then you can be generous with your time, with your ear, So that's another kind of generosity. They said there's 3 kinds of generosities. Another lists within lists. So there's 3 kinds of generosity. There's the material generosity, material of giving things. There's the material of giving the Dharma. So when even if you know only a little bit of Dharma, as long as you don't get too like egocentric about it and think like, I know some Dharma, so I'm going to teach Dharma. Whatever Dharma and then you can share with others, you can give that. You can give, hey, life is impermanent. You have to be skillful about that. Don't do that after somebody's grandma just passed away or something like that. I mean, that's maybe not the most skillful thing, but. So there's giving of the Dharma, and then there's one that I really like a lot, which is giving of fearlessness. It's called Jikme Tongwa, and it's it's kind of that's an advanced practice, because you've got to kind of be in this state of mind yourself where you're like, okay, you've realized a little bit about impermanence yourself, you've realized a little bit about unsatisfactoriness yourself, you realized a little bit about egolessness yourself, you've realized a little bit about the fact that others are just concerned with their happiness as I am, and all this sort of stuff, and then you start to realize that, hey, you know what, actually everybody is kind of like my family, they're not so different from me, and so you start to cultivate slowly this sense of like responsibility for them, for others, where you're like, they're not just people in my movie. They're not just characters in my drama. They're actually individual sentient beings with lives, with feelings, with aspirations, with consciousness, with awareness, who experience things just the way I do. And you know what? And we've all been together lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, in all kinds of scenarios and situations. And so you start to cultivate this sense of like, caring for them and responsibility for them. And this sense that like, you know what? I'm going to actually be there for them as much as I possibly can. And when beings are afraid, when beings are afraid of being harmed, when beings are afraid of suffering, when beings are afraid of confusion and doubt and ignorance and all these sorts of things, we say to ourselves, you know what, I'm going to be there for them when that time comes, And so we give to them our fearlessness, because we know a little bit about the Dharma. We know a little bit about, like I say, impermanence and emptiness and reincarnation and all these sorts of things. And we say, hey, so when somebody is like really needing it, we can just be like, I'm here for you, you can lean on me. So this is a beautiful kind of generosity as well. So once we've got a little bit of generosity under our belt, we've kind of now, one thing I want to point out too is that these are not like you don't master generosity and then you move on to ethics, for example, and then after ethics, then you start working on patience. But while you're working on ethics, you're completely impatient. It's not like that. We're actually working on all these things, in concordance with one another. But in a sense, they do flow in this order as well. So I don't know, take that how you want. Maybe that's more confusing. But anyway, so we've cultivated some generosity. We've reduced our selfishness a little bit. We opened our hearts a little bit, and so now we move on and we work on our ethics. Okay. And again, we talked about ethics before as being, the guiding principle or the essence of ethics is that love and compassion, and that the criteria of what is ethical behavior is basically not harming oneself or others, not doing quote unquote negative actions. Actions that bring suffering are ones that we try to avoid, generally speaking, from now on, once we've kind of taken up this spiritual Buddhist path. Because we're trying to get out of suffering, we're trying to avoid it, and in a skillful way and in a final way. So then we train in ethics. Then we also, one of the 6 perfections that we're working on in the spiritual path is patience. Patience, or also it can be called forbearance as well. So being able to just take what's happening, take what's giving to us, even if people are making us angry, even if people are calling us out on our BS and they're right, or if they're wrong, and it makes us so angry, and we want to lash out at them, and we want to just put them in their place because we want to win. Because how dare you talk to me like that? How dare you point out my flaws to everyone? Because they're not true, or maybe they are true, but it doesn't matter. How dare you do that to me? Like me again, it's me that's the center, takes center stage here. When we become angry, our meanness becomes really, really, really solidified, like really fast, like instantly actually. The minute somebody cuts you off in traffic, or somebody does something at work that you don't like, or your boss criticizes you, or somebody screams at you or whatever, the immediate reaction is to get really tight and just close ourselves off, and to become really here and solid and real, and we just there's this me, and I need to protect myself, and I need to sometimes protecting yourself means like lashing out at others, and doing a preemptive strike, and things like that. And we do this all the time in our lives, right? And we've experienced this countless times. So we're training in patience in those situations because of that, because that's incorrect. It's an incorrect conclusion that we're, even though it feels like I am really here, there's really a me here, because this other person is being such a jerk to me. And it makes you feel so solid and real, even though it feels like that way. Without a doubt, if you can step back from that anger and use that anger as a moment to say, like, okay, so who is angry? And you go over all of your meditations and all of your experience of going through the non-self, the fact that there's really not a solid, real, independently existing self here. If you can take a step back from that, you see there's not. I'm feeling angry, but who is feeling angry? Who is the angry person? Is it this body? Is it Chris? Is it Christopher? Is it Christopher Michael Lemig Jr.? Is it is it the Irish part of me? Is it the And so you go through this process of examination, and you're like, no, there's really nobody here, nobody permanent. There's not a permanent, solid, real, existing, hard nucleus self here, like I feel when I'm angry. So we train in patience in those circumstances so that we can have that break. So instead of flying off the handle in rage, because we do feel so offended and so so attacked and so vulnerable and so threatened. We are able to, over time, after training in this again and again and again and again, and doing other trainings as well, we can take a step back and ask that question: who's getting angry? We can ask that question, and if we're not buying into that, and I know that's a pretty advanced Buddhist concept that can be confusing, we can at least say, like, okay, so is the anger itself, like, what is the anger itself? What is that emotion? Am I always angry? Is it permanent? Am I never going to not be angry again? And then you're like, no, I'll probably get over this. I've gotten over every other, little, tantrum I've had, so why not this one? And then you can look at, like, so wait, this person that I'm angry at, like, who is that person? Why am I angry at this person? Because we solidify the other as well, and we start, labeling them as evil and the enemy and whatever. And so we can step back and take a look at that situation too. Are we seeing this person clearly? Is this person really attacking us, or is this person being truthful about our faults? Do we need to hear this? Maybe that's what's going on. Or maybe it's just they're having like the worst day of their life and we don't even know what's going on with them. And 10 minutes from now, they're going to break down in tears and say, I'm so sorry for saying that. I just, everything that was my reality is now crushed, or something, we don't know. Maybe they're a jerk. I don't know. But, but they're not like only a jerk, they're also like other people like them and things like that. So, anyway, so this is the purpose of this patience here, this forbearance, this ability to take a step back and say, like, okay, what's actually going on here? So rather than lashing out with anger, we apply a little bit of patience, give ourselves a moment to just take a few breaths and just try to see things more clearly as they are. So, and also it gets us out of a lot of trouble too, because we all know that if we get angry, and just all of a sudden, just the nastiest stuff can come out, and just stuff we're like, oh God, why did that relationship's over, So that's no taking that back. So, so in the short term, it also can be a way to cultivate more happiness for ourselves and to eliminate some suffering. So there's some very deep ways of looking at it, and there's some very practical, and they're all practical, but there's some deeper ways and more nature reality ways, and then there's also these other tangible right now benefits too that we can get out of practicing a little patience. Okay, so next one, I'm going on and on here. Next one is joyous effort. So this one is a wonderful one as well too, because we're on the spiritual path. Practicing patience is a difficult thing. So once we've tried that a little bit, we might need to boost ourselves up once in a while, and because sometimes it's like, I just don't want to be patient. This person is just constantly pushing my buttons all the time, and I just once need to just let loose on them, And but then at that point we need to remember, it's like, no, you know what? I'm going to keep on going with this patience practice. I'm going to keep on going with this spiritual path. I'm going to do this joyfully, because even though it doesn't feel like it right now, I know and I have trust and faith in the fact that this is in the long term going to benefit me. It's going to benefit others. And, it's like really the aim of Buddhism, this, or at least, this Buddhism that we're studying here, this it's called Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism. We'll talk a little bit about those distinctions next week. But, it's so beautiful. The aim is so that it can, that all beings be free from suffering. The aim is that so that all beings attain perfect enlightenment, that all beings are completely and ultimately happy. So that's pretty awesome. So let me keep doing that. Let me keep working on that with joy in my heart, daily, every day. Yeah, it's going to be difficult, but we don't have to whip ourselves. We don't have to, scream at ourselves to get out like a drill sergeant, all the time. Sometimes you do, but not all the time. You can be kind to yourself, and you can be joyful while you're training on this path. So that's something else we train on. Then we come to meditative concentration, and again, this is towards the end of the list, because we kind of got to get our minds and our conduct in order before we can sit down and do any real serious meditation, because again, if our conduct is out of line with, basic ethical values, and, if we're hurting a lot of other people, if we're stealing, if we're lying, cheating, manipulating, all that sort of stuff, meditation, just, you're not even going to sit down and meditate, most likely, unless you're some corporate, baron, robber baron, and I'm going to meditate, concentrate so I can be better at acquisitions. Yeah. I don't know, maybe you can do that, but anyway, so then we sit down, we develop that meditative concentration, and then again, the last perfection, or the sixth perfection, is that wisdom that we get out of all this experience, all this training, all this understanding, all this focused practice. So six perfections, basically it's the whole Buddhist path, the whole spiritual path, and it's sort of like these six very concise words that then can be unpacked in all these ways. And really, there's teachings I've been to on generosity that go for days, ethical teachings, years, you can talk about this stuff for years. And it's not just to talk about it. It's not just to just have people hear themselves speak about it, or to just sit there and just go, oh God, how long is this going to go on? But it's really because we need to hear it again and again and again and again and again and again, and think about it. Take it with us. Go and sit down on the cushion. What is generosity? What are ethics? What is patience? All this sort of stuff. And then we integrate it then into our minds. Because we have to convince ourselves, because a lot of this stuff is counterintuitive. It's exactly the opposite message that our society is giving us all the time. Of like, you're number one, get yours now before it's too late. Everyone else, it's all competition. All this sort of stuff is being thrown at us on a daily basis, and we're steeped in it. And so we have to then, to counter all of that, steep ourselves in something else. So that's why we do all this stuff again and again and again. And this becomes then, this is the path that we're on. So we bring it into our lives, into our daily lives, into our activities, our actions, our thoughts, our words. So that's the six perfections. So we didn't get too far today, but there's a bunch of other lists. So again, I just kind of maybe take this home. You can look at it, read over it. Some of the things might sound completely mystifying. Other things might seem pretty intuitive or obvious. But what you can do is you can do some YouTube searches and Google searches and stuff like that, and find some other teachers out there who will give some wonderful, much better explanations than myself on all this stuff, and you can learn a little bit more. So, but you will, if you kind of stick with this Buddhist path, this Buddhist thing for a little bit, you're going to see this stuff come up again and again and again. The six perfections, endless teachings on there about the six perfections. Dalai Lama teaches on it all the time. The four immeasurables. That's a daily practice, prayer, that pretty much every Buddhist says every single day and tries to contemplate every day. So immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable empathetic joy, and immeasurable equanimity. So cultivating these ideas of like really stretching your mind out and saying like, yeah, love is an emotion that brings me and others happiness, so I'm going to increase that to an immeasurable state, to where it's like it includes everybody. What do you mean everybody? I mean everybody. But you mean Donald Trump? Yeah, Donald Trump. You mean the neo-Nazis? Yeah, it does include them. We don't condone horrible, terrible behavior, but we do love every single being, because every being is to us, every sentient being is to their own degree a victim of their delusions, of their negative emotions, of their confusion. And actually the people who are acting out the most and the worst and the most horribly are actually the ones that are suffering the most, and the ones that are the most confused, and who really need us the most to be fearless for them, to not exclude them, to always keep them in our hearts. There may come a time where there might be big conflict or something like that. And it's not getting rolled over, idiotic pacifism or anything like that necessarily, but it's always, always, always never giving up on sentient beings, because their confusion, their delusion, their ignorance is temporary. And, in the case of someone who's like, just a bigot or a racist, for example, I have never met a person who was born that way, and I know plenty of people who used to be racists. I knew plenty of people who used to be homophobes. I knew plenty of people who used to be, xenophobes or whatever, and they're not anymore, because it's a temporary thing, and it can be overcome, because it's a temporary delusion, temporary ignorance. So anyway, so we cultivate this love for all beings. Everyone is included. This compassion goes to all beings. This wish that every being be, endlessly joyful, and rejoicing in their happiness is for all beings, and wishing that all beings have this state of mind where like everyone's in a state of equanimity. We're all equal. Nobody's better or worse than the other is also something that we cultivate. So anyway, that's a wonderful one too. So that's something we contemplate on a daily basis and try to practice on a daily basis. So so all kinds of stuff there. If you have any questions about today or anything we've studied so far.
Any specific prayers relating to the four unmeasurables, or
yeah.
There's the Chenrezig stuff, but
there's
I guess the basic question is, there are, because I've seen in the Chenrezig program that there are specific prayers, but are there specific prayers, like you were saying, that people do every day that have to do with these in particular?
A lot of them, yeah, sure. And they're included in, like the Six Perfections is always included in the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer. By practicing generosity and the other far-reaching attitudes, may I attain Buddhahood in order to obtain Buddhahood. So generosity and the other far-reaching attitudes, that's the Six Perfections. So that's understood, So a lot of this stuff is like in shorthand in a lot of the Tibetan prayers, especially. So they'll have like they'll have this word that basically means etc. So it says like number one of this list, and then you're just it's assumed that you know the rest. So, but if and then people say these prayers very quickly, and so there's not a lot of opportunity to think about them all the time. But you are reminding yourself a little bit every day, and you can always, if you want, for example, take a prayer and go slowly through it. So you can say like, by practicing generosity and the other far-reaching attitudes, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then you just stop and you go like, okay, so what is generosity? And then you start thinking about generosity a little bit, and then you cultivate generosity, and then you say, may I be able to be generous perfectly, completely generous, to the point where I know that I can't do it now, but may I be able to give even my own life to others when it's necessary. We can't do that now, that's not where we're at, but we make that aspiration at some point in a future lifetime. Can we do that? And then we go through, and then we say, may I be able to work on my ethics until I absolutely perfect my conduct, so it is in all ways, everything that I do is only in line with one purpose, and that is to benefit others. So may I only bring well-being to others. Everything I do, everything I say, everything that I do, and then then you go through with those, and you can just do that, as aspiration on your own. But yeah, pretty much everything is in prayers or has a prayer. So.
Why say prayers so fast?
How
does one actually focus on what you're saying if you're just saying it really quickly?
I have some thoughts about that. I haven't heard. I'm trying to think if there's somebody who's made mention of that in the past. Tibetans especially are saying things really fast. So we would do like all day pujas, all day sadhanas, where at the monastery, where you're just going through these things, ripping through them, as fast as you possibly can, because you have to get them all done. That's one reason, because you have to. You have these commitments to do these practices, and finish them within a certain period of time. So if you did them really slow, it would take weeks, and you need to do them all in a day. So So that's one practical reason, but also it doesn't matter really how fast or how slow you're doing them, as long as you're doing them all the time. That's kind of the idea of the Tibetans, is it doesn't matter if you're like, you'll see, people doing their mantras like this fast, and faster.
It's like a hum.
Yeah, but you are in your mind enunciating the whole mantra.
And if you're enunciating, you don't necessarily have to think about the meaning of what you're saying, but the fact that you're enunciating the words that mean those things, you're saying the prayer.
Well, what we're trying to do is, especially when it comes to prayers in particular, is that most of our speech is completely meaningless. What are we talking about? We're talking about politics, and we're talking about movies, and we're talking about stuff around the water cooler. Generally speaking, I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of it is pretty much could be left unsaid, or it's really like we don't even remember what we're saying. We don't. It's just like we're just filling air, with words. A lot of it. So the idea is like, instead of doing that, then instead of wasting my speech, which I only have for a certain period of time, let me use it then to say things that are virtuous and wholesome and have a lot of positive meaning associated with them. And even if I'm not like totally thinking about what I'm saying all the time, every single second, that's the goal, but realistically, we're not there. At the very least, there's this reflex that we're building up, this habit being built up of using our speech to say positive things. And so that's why we do the mantras really fast, so that we're sort of steeping this whole area with positive, beautiful, aspirational, blessed, if you want to go there, words and sounds. And it has a really positive effect on people, So that does that sort of answer your question? So why do we say things that fast? You don't have to say them that fast all the time. It's not like you have to, but what you're trying to do is fill up as much of your day as possible with positive speech. So either saying mantras all the time, whenever you're not speaking to somebody, and as long as people aren't watching and thinking you're a crazy person talking to yourself, just do mantras as much as possible is really good, or saying prayers over and over again is really good. And again, it's using our speech in a really positive way, and it brings your mind. At first you're totally distracted. You're just thinking about, your mind's just going in all kinds of directions, But then too, like once in a while, you'll be doing these prayers, and even though you're doing them really fast, you're like, oh yeah, that's talking about the Four Noble Truths. I like the Four Noble Truths is good. That's a good thing, Or it's talking about the Four Immeasurables. Loving kindness for all beings, compassion for all beings, equanimity for all beings. And so you're like, yeah, and it is there. All that meditation you've done that we should be doing over the years and over a gradual amount of time, it comes back, right away. And we don't need to always sit down and examine it, ad nauseum. It naturally starts to arise. So, yeah. And so, and these prayers, especially in the Tibetan tradition, are just beautiful. They're beautiful. Like every word of it is positive aspiration. May I and all sentient beings attain a full awakening. All sentient beings are my kind mothers. May I always, always, always work for their benefit. May I continuously be there for them and never give up on them. And it's just like, yeah, so it doesn't matter if you say them fast or slow. That's my thought on it. So, yeah. Any other questions or?
Did you want us to bring questions next week?
Yeah, bring some questions. We'll have, I have somebody sent an email with some questions, so I'll, address those. I had a couple of ideas, but that I can fall back on if there's not that many questions or whatever. But yeah, please bring some questions. Think about things that like, like who's the green one over there? Whatever, whatever. So or what's the deal with all these different, images, or, whatever questions you have, whatever things that are like you're not sure about, or, we're going to talk about why we take our shoes off in the room, and, what a prostration means, and, bowing to inanimate objects, like what's going on with that, so. So, yeah. But anything really. I want the last class especially to be like just you guys, what do you want to know? What are you uncertain about? So, as much as possible.
What's the chance of doing more classes?
I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to be in Seattle soon, so I'm moving to Seattle at the end of the month.
What?
Yeah. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm getting a real sad face here. I don't know if it's sad or if it's just like, it's more like. So, but anyway, thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks, Chris.
And yeah, thank you. All right, cool. Thanks everybody online. And if you were trying to get through in some way with any questions or anything, you can always email me, answer the email that I sent out. Next week I'll put my phone number in the something somewhere so that you can text me if you have questions or whatever, if something comes up. So, okay. Thanks everybody. So, we dedicate the merit to at the end. A lot of positive potential here. And we do a dedication at the end of all any spiritual practice that we do. Whether it's listening to a teaching, doing a prayer, doing a meditation, or whatever, we generate a great motivation. We try to do that practice for the benefit of all beings, and then at the end we say, like, whatever positive energy I've cultivated here, whatever positive imprints, may these just continue to grow continuously and just benefit others, ripen into beneficial causes and conditions for all time, for all beings. So. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, I'll go hit the stop button.